So I'm going to start our session officially. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us for tonight. So it's going to be our geography webinar where we're going to explore the content, the topics that Dan has created for Examcraft Formative. So as you know, Dan has over 20 years experience in teaching, and he has also published 2 books, and he has a very close relationship on working with the Examcraft group. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm just gonna run through how the session is gonna be. We aim to finish at 7:30, so we're not gonna take too much of your time. Once again, reiterating, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate. So Dan is going to talk through a little bit of the topics that he has created for Examcraft Formative. And afterwards, I'm going to give a little demo on the platform. And I'm going to just give you a little tour and show more or less how it works around, so everything ties in together. If you have any questions, do pop in the Q&A, and we're going to have a little Q&A at the end. And also, if you need to contact us, if you need to find us, go to our website, and there you can contact us with any questions. If you want to book a demonstration and understand a little bit more in depth how Examcraft Formative can help you in your school. So with no further ado, I would like to hand it over to our guest, Dan. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks, Carolina. You might allow me to share screen if you get a chance there. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'll try not to keep you too long. I'm just going to give a small little presentation on geography formative. It's just a really quick one, but it's just to give an idea what I think formative can offer students, can offer teachers. It's kind of I feel it's a very exciting platform. When I was asked by Philip at Examcraft to come on board, I kind of asked myself a few questions first. I've been making pre-papers out for Examcraft for probably 12 or 13 years at this stage. So as you can imagine, in the last few years, when we had that changeover from the old junior cert geography exam to the junior cycle exam, and we had that gap where, we had one sample paper which came very late, it was quite challenging to design and create the pre-papers. And it's kind of during that process that I kind of got excited about Examcraft Formative, because, the change, thanks, Carolina, the change from the old junior cert to the new junior cycle, it made quite the difference. So if you just bear with me a second, I'm just going to put up a really small kind of presentation we put together. Just, as I said, it's just what I think students might get out of this, and what I think the teachers probably, which you're probably more interested in, will get out of this, okay? So when we started the process, I kind of asked myself, in terms of formative, what would be the questions that junior cycle students tend to ask themselves? And that kind of, my daughter was in junior cert last year, so I've had a real insight into this. And that was the main question was, why is there so much to cover? Everyone has their own opinion on junior cycle. I think I have my own opinions on the new junior cycle too. But an examination and a syllabus that was designed to possibly reduce stress on students, the amount of material that is to be covered I know as a teacher it's quite overwhelming, and I can only imagine for students it's quite overwhelming too. I know the logic of a common paper. I know the logic of a student answers every question, whereby it's quality, it's fairness off the board, everybody answers the same question. But in geography and history is my other subject, what that creates is an enormous breadth of material to cover. And I think this is one of the places where formative will come in and answer that question, or at least provide a solution to that question. I mean, second question then would be related to the third. They're very similar. Students would ask me, I run a lot of revision courses. I do a few grinds and stuff as well in junior cycle. What do I need to revise for the exam? Like, irrespective of however we talk about the new junior cycle, you can't change the mentality of students. And the mentality of students is always, how am I going to be judged on assessment? And there's nothing we can do about that. We can't change that at the moment. That is the mentality, be it formative assessment, summative assessment. The focus of a student is always going to be on assessment. And frequently the question is, what of all this massive content of material, what do I need to revise? And related to that, obviously, how do I know where I'm weakest? Right? And they're kind of the standard questions. And that brings in kind of one of my own little theories of content versus application of content within the junior cycle. So, the content is huge. I mean, it really is. I mean, I've just written a little junior cert revision book, and for both Examcraft Formative and the book, we divided the junior cycle geography course up into topics, and as best as we could to narrow it down, there's 24 topics, which when I come out of the presentation, I'll just go into formative and show you a bit of it. But even if you have an excellent student and a strong student who absorbs and is really well taught a lot of content, from volcanic activity to primary activities to sustainability to everything that's in that cycle, you need to learn to apply the content. And I liken it to, you can practice swinging a golf club a million times, but unless you get onto the golf course and actually hit the ball, you don't really know if it's working. And students can learn content. Students can absorb content given the different methodologies used by you, the teachers, but they need and they want more than they need even. They want to apply that content and see if they can apply that content in an assessment format. Now, the traditional way to apply content and for students to assess themselves and learn if they can apply that content that they've worked so hard at is traditionally past papers. But if you put a junior cycle pre-paper up in front of a first year, you're just going to frighten them. Such as the size of the paper, the variety of the questions within it, you're just going to frighten them. I would argue the same applies to second years. I know there are various online study clicks and whatnot who do try, and I'm not sure they've done it for junior cycle yet, such as the frequency with which it started. But past papers are difficult for first and second years to apply the content they've learned. It's extraordinarily difficult. Even if you divide that content into some topics, it can be overwhelming because something like volcanic activity has massive amounts of information in it. They might have covered it yet. And so formative seems to be the fit. For me anyway, formative is the fit. Once Philip and the team at Examcraft, Vivian and Carolina, pitched this, to me, as someone who sets pre-papers, to me, who's someone who's a daughter asking those questions at the top of the page, formative seemed to be the right fit for me. Now, if you move to teachers, oddly, I find the first question is always the same. Why is there so much to cover? Again, the breadth of the course is, I wouldn't say terrifying, but it can be very, very difficult. And we'll talk in a minute about if you're teaching the same cohort for 3 years, fair enough, but if you get a new cohort in and you got to figure out, well, what have they done, or what are they strong at, what are they weak at? Extremely difficult to do that. And it's extremely difficult to figure out where are these students struggling, right? And even within that, you might have a cohort coming into you in second year, you might have a cohort coming into you in third year, and you have group difficulties in terms of topics they find difficult, but you're going to have individual difficulties. And how do I then sort this out? How do I deal with the 3 kids in my class who are finding X very difficult, whereas the rest of the students are finding it very easy? And I suppose the magic question we all asked ourselves when the junior cycle came out, how do I deal with these learning outcomes? Now, again, I think just like the junior cycle, I think teachers have different opinions on learning outcomes. I can see the value in the learning outcomes. I know the methodology. I know the theory behind it. Again, though, I speak from looking at it from a practical perspective, from looking at a student's perspective. Those learning outcomes can be vague. They can be challenging, both for teachers and students. Again, if you look at the new junior cycle, in all the talk that was prior to the junior cycle, it was this linear versus a non-linear approach to learning. And again, I think we can all see the value in the non-linear approach to learning. You'll see it in some of the questions we said in Examcraft pre-paper. So if we're doing something like volcanic activity as a question, we'll branch out from that, because volcanic activity can represent a natural disaster. So we'll branch out from that and we'll ask part 4 or part 5 of that question on maybe a different natural disaster. And then, of course, we'll branch out to a third strand, which will be to examine the environmental, social, and economic effects of that. So I can see the value in assessment in terms of the nonlinear approach. However, if you're going to take a nonlinear approach to teaching, theoretically, you shouldn't have a textbook. Because textbooks by their nature start at the start, end at the end, and there's very few teachers who won't follow that process once they get a textbook. But it's unrealistic to expect any teacher to take a nonlinear approach and not use a textbook. All right. And the final issue I feel the teachers find is, where do I get resources outside of these past papers? And past papers are limited, of course, because there's only been a couple of years. There are sample papers out there, but resource allocation. And I'm on Twitter a lot, and I follow a lot of you guys on Twitter. And you can see the work the teachers put into in sharing resources, allocating resources, but that's an awful lot of work to do. So I suppose the next topic would be the textbooks. Like, again, I know the authors of some of the junior cycle textbooks, and they're fantastic. Just fantastic geographers, fantastic authors. But they made out these textbooks at a time when there had been no assessment. And to that end, understandably, all the authors basically had to try and cover as many possible forms of assessment, and it leads to very, very busy textbooks. And that can lead to assessment confusion. So this hopefully is where formative comes in. All right. And I say hopefully, I'm certain of it, to be fair. I mean, the team have done a established job on it. For geography formative, and I'll come out of the presentation in a minute, and I'll just very briefly, before we go back to Carolina, I'll go through just the table of the content and the geography formative, and I'll give you a scan of a couple of questions. But we've divided it into 24 topics, and we followed the topic-based approach. The reason we followed the topic-based approach is to allow some sort of freedom for teachers to approach this course in the manner in which they please. Because it's a topic-based approach, you can select whichever topic you want, and you'll be able to ask questions formatively based on that. Within each topic, as you'll see when we come out of the presentation in a second, we've created subtopics. And I say I mean, Carolina was very nice. She introduced me as the author of the bank of content, but I had two great teachers helping me, by the way, and I think they'd be a bit pissed at me if I didn't give them credit. So we Dermot Plunkett up in Cavan and Andrew Barry down in Cork, and they were huge contributors to the geography format. And what we did was, we have a topic. For example, I'll show you one like volcanic activity in a minute. But we then subdivided that into subtopics, starting with definitions, then landforms, and then impacts. So as you teach the topic in volcanic activity, you don't have to teach the entire topic of volcanic activity and then give a formative assessment. You can give formative assessments as you move through the topic. And that avoids this kind of large assessment at the end of topic, which can be difficult for students, particularly the weaker ones. Because I know there's teachers out there who do place a high value on the strands and the learning outcomes, and they're really into it, and it's commendable because it's difficult, I think. Some teachers have an amazing grasp of them. Every topic, every single question is linked, as I'm sure you know, to all the learning outcomes and strands. And the benefit of that predominantly would be you'll be able to look at your results. And as you'll see in a minute, you can access these on an app on your phone, you can access them on your laptop, but you can look at your class and you can see in what learning outcomes the class was struggling in first year. You can see in what learning outcomes the class was struggling in second year, and this will form the basis largely for your revision for junior cycle when you're coming after Easter in third year. And as I said, one of the amazing thing I found about this is that you can track individual student progression, you can track group progression, and you can see as a group where you need to improve. But way more importantly, I think, you can see individually where you need to improve. And that's presented in graphic form. It's easy to read. It can be shared with the classes we'll talk about in a second. So again, I'll try not to keep you too long. We've only a small bit left. I suppose the question most of you would be asking would be, how do you use formative? And I've come up with kind of a number of ways that I would use formative. So obviously the one I alluded to a few minutes ago, we can assess students on a subtopic basis. And that's within, and again, I'll just keep coming back to volcanic activity. Within volcanic activity, we can cover definitions. And of course, then we can give a quick formative assessment on definitions. Then we can cover landforms and we can give a quick sub assessment on that. And finally, we can finish with, for example, short-term and long-term responses to a natural disaster, social, economic, and environmental consequences of a natural disaster. And we can do it on a subtopic basis, which really drills down into my students who struggle and who's strong and who needs help. We can use formative as a homework basis. As you'll see in a minute, formative it works perfectly on mobile phones, it works on laptops, it works on tablets. So again, for students who might not have access to everything, I think everyone has a mobile phone. You can use it as a homework basis. You can use it broadly as a topic basis. This would be larger in terms of I'll examine all of volcanic activity or I'll examine all of primary activities. But it doesn't need to be a long formative assessment. As you'll see in a minute, you can select from within the topic what questions you want to do. And if you really want to have a crack at it, maybe like a midterm exam, you can assess students on a multi-topic basis. So if you've done plate tectonics, volcanic activity, earthquakes, and folding, for example, well, you can give a formative assessment on those topics by selecting what you deem to be the most important questions from those topics and forming your own formative. This one is my favorite one, actually. I think this isn't used enough. I think we've all gone into a class. I know I certainly have, and maybe haven't had a tough night the night before or just a tough week, and you say, oh my God, what am I going to do with this class? And formative presents a really fun way whereby you can put it up on your own class screen and you can have a formative assessment that's in an open class format. You can take answers from the class, you can create teams within the class, and they can shout out the answers, they can write down the answers, and you can have it almost like a quiz basis, and it makes it a little bit more fun than sort of formal assessment can be for many pupils. So the last kind of topic here is the fairness of formative. I was quite pleased with that bit of alliteration there. But what I find with formative is, we have challenges in the classroom. Now, different teachers have different challenges, right? But we have challenges in the classroom in terms of mixed ability, right? And formative will deal with that in a beautifully private way. So we have a massive bank of questions in geography formative. We have 1,500 questions in geography formative. And the reason for that is they are loosely, not formally, but they're loosely divided into 3 levels of difficulty. Now, we haven't labeled them before you ask with levels of difficulty, because that would have meant kind of we'd have to regiment it. We have to have this amount, we have to have that amount. We trust the teachers here. I mean, you will see the very easy questions in earthquakes, for example. You'll see the medium, you'll see the difficult. But we have broadly assigned 3 levels of difficulty throughout the bank. And teachers can select whatever questions they want for a class. They can deselect questions they deem to be too hard for their class if you have a cohort that are weak. You can edit questions, you can add questions for the topic or subtopic. You have a wonderful helpline at Examcraft, people who will help you at the drop of a hat. And you can do that on an individual basis, believe it or not. So if you have a kid in your class and you know that kid needs confidence, and that kid needs to believe that they can do well because they've been told all their life they can't do well, you can give the kid that confidence by giving them a formative assessment which is at the level that they need to be at to improve. You can then assign different questions to other people in the class, and therefore, you talk about differentiated learning. This is differentiated learning in assessment form. All right. If, for example, I haven't covered the accepted answers, which possibly might happen, so you might say, oh God, that guy didn't include this as a possible answer. You can edit that yourself. You can put in your own accepted answers based on what you've taught your cohort, and you can change the rubrics if you want. And I think one of the excellent features of formative is, if you're going to give a formative assessment for homework, you have the ability to time limit it for obvious reasons. You want a student to complete those 8 questions quite quickly, so it's a fair and they're not tempted to cheat or whatnot. But again, you have Dan Sheedy, who's a very weak student. You can allocate that weak student that bit extra time to complete the formative. And again, that builds up confidence with the student. All right. Now, I think the last point is particularly valid, and you're nearly done with me. I know you'll be glad. You will get the feedback from formative as the teacher as to what parts of the course you're struggling with. You can present the information to the class, as in, this question was answered really well, that question wasn't. And any kid in the class who feels like they were the only one who didn't do well, or they were the only one who struggled with that question, well, they're going to sit at the back of that class and they're going to say, oh, look, it wasn't just me. Loads of people in the class found that difficult. So look, I'm not bad at geography. I'm a good student. Loads of other students are in the same boat as me. And again, that will hopefully engender a bit of confidence in them. You'll notice in 2 minutes when we flick onto formative, there is an unequal number of questions per topic. And that is, like, I know subjects like maths, they lend themselves perfectly to, let's have 15 questions in every topic. But as you know, as geography teachers, there is an unequal weighting. So one topic like mass movement, that creates a very small number of questions. Folding at junior cycle level, that's a very small number of questions. And then we whip up to secondary economic activities, we need to have more on that. All right. You'll notice if you take the trial with Examcraft and Formative, you'll notice I do have a repetition of concept assessment. Now, what I mean by that is, if we look at glaciation, you'll notice I have maybe 5 to 6 different questions which all link back into corries and arrests. And there is that repetition of a concept assessment. And the reason for that is, what I always tell my students is, it's all well and good looking at the exam papers and knowing what an arret is in an exam paper, but that image isn't going to come up in the Leaving Cert. The examiner is going to go into Google and find a completely different image. So it's no good the student knowing one image of an arret, one diagram of a C-stack, C-arch, C-stump, geo and blow. They've got to know multiple of them. They have to be able to recognize all these images in different ways. So we've attacked every single topic from every possible angle, right? Just to ensure that these students really have a good grasp of it, all right? So we have images, we have diagrams, we have articles, we have tables, we have graphs, and I've just included here, and we'll have it on screen in a moment. We have a variety of question formats. We have multiple choice questions, drag and drops, fill in the blanks, short answer questions, match table questions, and resequence questions. And the exciting one that we're putting on a bit more of now are the free response questions. And again, you'll notice in geography, you have these where you have to give a brief account of, all right, or explain briefly. And we know from last year's exam and the year before, these are 5 to 6 line answers. So we're going to be adding even more of those to the platform in the next few days, actually, and weeks. And they will mimic the SEC style, all right? Now, basically, we'll finish with an overview of the Examcraft and what we're hoping to achieve for junior cycle students. So we have, as you see on the left, we have a series of revision books coming out that we hope completely shortens the content for you, the teacher and the student. So that's content. You now have Examcraft Formative Assessment, and that formatively assesses the content within those books. Those books will be, 150 to 160 pages long only. And of course, as you all know from Examcraft, if I can get myself out of the way here, as you all know from Examcraft, we have our pre-papers. So, we feel at Examcraft that you have this platform, this tripartite platform for assistant teachers and students, whereby we can provide the content, we can assist with formative assessment, and of course, we assist with summative assessment. Now, the very last thing I go is, and I'm nearly done, Carolina, sorry. This is my bank of questions. So this is what you'll have when you go in as a teacher. We have all the topics here on the left-hand side. You can see them down along. They're my formative topics, and here are the bank of questions. So you can just see we've divided them in. So topic 1 is plate tectonics, but you can see our subtopics here. Plate tectonics, which is definitions, layers, plate movement. We go down along volcanic activity. We've subdivided it. Earthquakes, we've subdivided. So you can give your formative assessments on any one of these topics here. And, it really allows you to track progression and development as you move through it. There's topics 9, 10, mass movement, climate migration, secondary activities, tertiary economic activities. So you can click into any of those and we'll automatically provide a formative assessment, or you can edit them and create your own. And if I just go back to this, if we just go into one, and if you give me 2 more minutes, I'll be out of here. So for example, if you look at ice, so again, your subtopics here, humans and ice. So we went to landforms and erosion. I have a soft spot for ice. It's my favorite topic. And so this is what the teacher would see when it comes up here. These are all the questions with the answers. I have a couple put in there. We'll get them out. But let's look at the preview. So this is what students would see. And you can see in the top right here, I'm on a laptop, so it's going to provide the view in laptop form. There's your tablet. There's your mobile phone. So no matter what, the student will be able to look at it. If we just go to full screen, if it comes to full screen, you should get a full preview, and there we are. So if you just look at some of the questions, so there's the first question the student will get. Drag and drop the correct terms. So you have the landform in this photograph is 3 steep sides. The drag and drop one isn't there for some reason, sorry. There's just your multiple choice. So the landform in this photograph is 3 steep sides, the birthplace of a glacier. So obviously you click on circ and you move down along. You see here what I mean by the repetition of questions. So there's our sharp ridge of rock, identify it. And again, we're kind of cross-referencing then. Do they know the difference between a pyramidal peak and an arête? That's the peak because it's the highest point. Again, you have a few multiple choice ones here. Then we've drag and drop into the diagram. We have table forms. I could go out now, but I know I'm keeping you very, very long. But you see, we have a variety of stimuli, diagrams, and as we move to other topics, so as we move, for example, to primary activities and economic activities, what we have then is we have graphs, we have tables, and there's questions based on them. If you look at volcanic activity, earthquakes, we have newspaper articles replicating the SEC structure, and then we have questions based on the newspaper article. Okay, so I'm conscious that I've kind of monopolized half of Carolina's time, so I'm going to hand you back. But I hope we've given you some sort of an idea of what formative offers. I think it's a breakthrough in assessment at second level schools. I really do. And I think most importantly, I think it's going to benefit the quietest students and the students who feel that they maybe aren't as good as other students when they really are. They just need that bit of almost private encouragement. So I'll hand you back to Carolina now. Thanks, Carolina.
Dan, thank you so much. Oh my God, I have no words for you. It's been amazing. And I have, what can I say? It was so inspiring that I feel like I'm speechless pretty much. It was amazing. Thank you so much. You spoke with so much passion and you covered so much in terms of the platform and how you thought through so much all this content that it's amazing. So I'm just going to stop your screen to share and I'm gonna then move into mine. No worries. So there you go.
Hello,
Oi,
welcome to Module 2.
that was me, but that's not what I want to show you today. So I'm gonna give you a little tour of Examcraft Formative. I think Dan spoke a lot about the content, so this is just gonna be a very, very brief 2-minute overview of the platform. And if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A box and I will answer them. As well, I just want to reiterate, if you think of anything else after this session, please contact us. You're going to find our contact on our website. So please do pop us messages in there. So this is how Examcraft Formative look like. Your home is like your dashboard. So you can see your last suggested formative. So the last ones I have been using and the last classes I have interacted with. Very briefly on your formatives, I like to think about it as your desk, so where you keep like your folders with the content inside. I think Dan covered a lot in terms of the geography content. I had selected actually structure and top of volcanoes to show you today, so I think one interesting thing I'm going to show you on Google Classroom, you can see here signalized with a Google, so it's synchronized with my Google Classroom. I'm gonna there view responses to show you how it looks like once you have a little bit more of responses in terms of like you can have quick overview of the whole class in terms of reports, how they're getting on. Here you can see Lucy, she kind of let go on the question 10, she didn't finish. Then you can kind of further investigate that. I mean, there's innumerous opportunities on things that you can do on Examcraft Formative in when you see the responses. There's also a few things that I would like to show, but I think it's we're a bit tight on time, but I'd like to say as well, you can export those. So it's very easy for you to use those for other topics of conversation when talking about some student development. And you can have insights as well in a particular question, as Dan said, very quickly clicking in the number of the question so you can see what the question was, and you can see here what each student have answered to that question. And if you need to kind of play with that, you can also hide the students' names, and you can be like, oh, the majority of the class is here, there, and so on. So you can create different types of engagement with your formatives. There is also multiple ways you can assign a formative that I'm going to quickly show you as well here on just settings. It's when you can change the types of assignment. So as Dan said, you can time it and so on. It's all in there. So very simple and easy. Here in classes is where you set up your classes. Here you can see I have a variety of them. These ones indicate the one I have set up manually. So if you don't use an LMS, that's no problem as well. But my example today is with Google Classroom, but it also integrates with Microsoft Teams. So in 2 clicks, you can quickly import a class by going into add and then roster sync. So it's going to prompt you to choose your account. I'm going to select my user, and once you kind of select your user, it's going to pull up all the classes you have into your Google Classroom dashboard. I have here my Google Classroom dashboard show you only have 4 classes. So all my 2, 3, 4 classes are in there. So any changes you have in a class as well is very easy to implement. Here in reports, you can see the overall results in a class. You can see like the platform keeps releasing new features and improving the usability as well. So here you can see, for example, this one here is filtered for the last 14 days, but you can add multiple filters. So just to kind of give a broader idea, you can also filter by class, by levels, and so on. And then just to show you how it looks like when it's more populated. So once you kind of have assign different formatives to a class, so how you can like follow up the improvement of a class or a particular student is all on reports. And again, you can export that in different ways. Here in the library, most importantly, is where you're going to find the content. So the content that has Dan mentioned, you find a full library of resources shared in the platform all over the world. And in to find the Examcraft content, if you're on a 30-day trial, or if you subscribe, then you have your school, you're going to find the name of your school. But if you're on the trial, you're going to go in here. So you're going to have the access to all the content of the 30-day trial. And here you have the subjects that are available at the moment. In Teams, you can manage your teams. admin as well. You can admin the background of your platform. And this is it, very simple. And I try to keep it very, very tight as we are a bit short in time today. But I'd like to thank Dan again. It was so inspiring. I feel like I want to invite you for all the webinars. It was amazing. So we have, I'm going to just take 2 more minutes and take one question from the audience. So that is someone asking here for a link for the recording, and of course we can send the recording is going to be available to everybody that subscribed to that. So anybody that had to drop in earlier, or anybody and your colleagues that had subscribed and couldn't attend, the recording will be sent. And also very soon we're going to have all the recordings of all of our webinars up on YouTube on demand, so the people can watch and refer to them afterwards, because I think that those webinars have been very helpful for the rollout of Examcraft Formative in the schools, and is always, I think, a very good resource for teachers to refer to and kind of gather new ideas on how to embed digital resources in their teaching and learning practices. So as I said, I don't want to take too much more of the time. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate. Once again, I don't have enough words to thank you, Dan, for the amazing contribution and talking with so much passion as well. That is definitely amazing. And that's it. With no further ado, I'm going to hand it on to Dan. Say thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Carolina. Thanks for all the work.
Thank you. And I hope to see you all soon for our next webinar in religious education.